Welcome to I Love the Library. Sometimes books come through that just really catch my eye, and this happened to be one of them. American Passage, The History of Ellis Island by Vincent J. Canetto. I've just had to read it, being a history buff. The island history starts out actually under a different name. It was Gibbet Island to start with. And the reason it had that name was because in the 19th century it was actually used for public hangings of pirates. They actually, after hanging the pirate, he was in chains and irons, they would hang him on a post called a gibbet. And the reason they did that was to deter anybody else from actually interfering with the commerce of the seas. After it was Gibbet Island, it was changed to Ellis Island. But before the processing of immigrants started at Ellis Island, they actually processed them at a state-run facility by the name of Castle Gardens. A lot of people thinking that their ancestors came through New York Harbor, they thought that they were processed through Ellis Island, but over 8 million immigrants came through Castle Gardens between 1855 and 1890. And in 1890 then, the process was moved to Ellis Island, and it became a federally run facility. There were all kinds of rules that had to be followed to process the immigrants. They were looking for mentally and physically healthy people who were going to become good citizens. So other than the obvious looking for physical problems, they looked for those that were likely to become a public charge. And what that meant was they wanted to make sure that the immigrants could support themselves once they were here. Between 1900 and 1907, 63% of the immigrants that were barred from coming into America were barred because of this one problem. They just didn't have enough money. They were also looking for moral turpitude, which is a legal concept. And what they were looking for was conduct that was considered contrary to community standards of justice, honesty, and good morals. Then, of course, they were looking for intelligence because they were worried that those that didn't meet the standards of intelligence would have children who also didn't meet those standards, and our country would become dumber. So anyway, I can tell you a story that was actually in the book about a young Italian woman who was 19 years old. She was the oldest child of 5. Her father, Salvatore, had already come to America and was living in Ohio as a steel worker. He saved enough money to send for his family. His wife and 5 kids came, and they arrived at Ellis Island in February of 1916. They actually became stranded at Ellis Island because Gemma was considered to be an imbecile, and that was the word they used at the time. 2 younger children were also sick and were detained at the Ellis Island Hospital, where the youngest, the only son in the family, who was 4 years old, passed away, and of course really devastated the family. In April of that year, they actually, after a lot of red tape and wrangling, were allowed to join Salvatore in Ohio, except of course they had to leave Gemma behind at Ellis Island. Well, during this time, World War I was taking place, so Gemma was stranded at Ellis Island. They couldn't deport her. So during World War I, once the United States got involved, we used Ellis Island as a place for the German enemy aliens to be housed. So they moved Gemma to New Jersey to a smaller immigration station. And she stayed there until November 20th of 1918, which is, of course, once the war was over, and then they deported her back to Italy. Salvatore spent all kinds of years writing letters to different officials. He wrote letters to 2 different American presidents in order to try and get his daughter to join the family in America, but unfortunately that never happened. There are all kinds of stories like that about immigrants and what they went through during the Ellis Island experience. There are other books on Ellis Island in the library. This happens to be one of them right here. It's Ellis Island Gateway to the American Dream by Pamela Reeves. And of course there are a lot more here in the library that we can help you find. Happy reading. Hope to see you at the library.